On a cold autumn evening, I love to be tucked up in my cabin, listening to the rain and wind lashing against the windows and pattering on the old tin roof. Many years ago, it was this same wonderful feeling of coziness which caused me to wonder about what being cozy actually meant. Where did this feeling come from? And why had such a deeply pleasurable experience remained so neglected by our modern culture? It was with questions such as these that I embarked on a long journey of self-discovery, a path that led to the understanding of a fundamental aspect of human nature, an understanding which had eluded humankind for millennia. From an early age, I was questioning the meanings of my dreams and fantasies, the sense of magic one gets from a beautiful evening sky, or a Christmas carol concert in candlelight, the sorts of things that people label as spiritual, that I call romantic, thoughts and feelings that seem to transcend everyday life, that feel so much grander and older than one's own thoughts could possibly be. What mystery! Although I had never been a believer in the supernatural claims of religion, some sort of magic was surely evident here. As the hopes and beliefs in the magical fantasies of childhood begin to fade, another type of fantasy becomes more dominant in the teenage mind. Glamour. The compulsive tendency to compare others as being somehow more special than ourselves. And at what point does the fantasy of glamour become the painful and malevolent imaginings of envy and jealousy, where one dreams of successful friends or past lovers pursuing enchanted lifestyles, while we only exist in the mundane? But although we may be well aware of the fallacy of these dreams, they continue to haunt our consciousness, firing up emotions and insecurities, urging us to fight back, to prove ourselves, or else to resign to despair and bitter resentment. As a confused and unconfident, but ambitious youth, I could not fully reject this mirage of glamour. Here, it seemed, was still a route to discover manifestations of that sense of magic which I longed for, in art and music, fashion and celebrity. So I left the countryside for London, and employed my talents in becoming a fashionable creative, mixing with the bright young stars of the day. Aspects of our basic human nature become heightened, or worse, the more we indulge them. Like irritations or anxieties, fears or sexual desires. Although my intention had been to discover the source of the fantasy notions of glamour, I was now proud to be an active part of a culture which promoted this apparent folly. But the fleeting excitement I felt for my own successes was not enough to compensate for the amount of envy and resentment generated through being immersed in my gratuitously competitive lifestyle, and the insecurity one feels when value is built upon the transient whimsy of fashion and empty promises of mystique and ambiguity. We reach the goals of our ambitions only to find that those goalposts have moved on to a higher level, a place where certain rivals appear to be basking in the glory which we have failed to attain. Confused and downhearted, now convinced that the magic of glamour was some sort of corruption of a pure and sublime spirituality, I returned to the countryside, determined to make sense of these muddled notions. Before, I had seen scientific inquiry as a kind of killjoy to the seemingly progressive thinking of the arty-farty, creative mind, and now I can see this is true. But grounding one's beliefs in logic and reasoning also gives a stability to the mind, which the arty-farty lacks. Fantasy concepts of magic may be just that, but the commonalities of people's fantasies are evident enough. And so, with an endeavour at reasoned inquiry, I attempted to gain an understanding of what, if anything, was the significance of this commonality of these pervasive ideas. It was during the course of this quest that I came to see that the minds of human beings work a lot more like those of animals than we generally believe, or wish to believe they do, and that instinctive animal tendencies, which influence our behaviour and shape our societies and cultures, are not being recognised as such, but mistakenly regarded as uniquely human traits, or heartfelt feelings. The deeply felt nature of these subconscious influences only reinforcing a sense of authenticity to these misled beliefs. Consequently, this lack of understanding leads to untold troubles for the individual and for human society as a whole. Unwittingly chasing the lure of an evolved animal drive, while believing it to be the goal of your dreams and ambitions, is sure to result in disappointment and confusion. We humans may become emotional over all kinds of complex issues, which no animal would ever see to comprehend. But nevertheless, the innate mechanisms of emotion are common to both man and beast. Irritation, aggression, fears and anxiety, and even envy can be observed in the behaviour of other mammals. Creatures who show affection and empathy for others, nurture their young, and live in peaceful communities, sharing resources and working together in teams. Excitability is also an aspect of our nature that we share with other animals, as it is a crucial force in influencing our behaviour, stoking up our emotions and activity, and spreading this amongst a group as a contagious flourish. A young rabbit, out feeding on the pasture, will soon be killed if he is not excited on sensing an approaching threat. Likewise, if he is not excited by sex and competition, he will not produce any offspring. From storytelling to movies, sporting events to fairground rides and computer games, human beings are forever seeking to find ever more inventive ways to further exploit and indulge this natural excitement for their thrills and entertainment. But even this is a trait we share with other species, as can be witnessed by watching dogs at play, chasing, pouncing and play fighting, long after reaching adulthood. That which really sets humankind apart from the animals is language. Without a complex language, we would be unable to contemplate thoughts as we do, to develop ideas, share them with others, and pass those ideas down through generations. If our superior mental abilities had not created these languages, in what ways would our behaviours differ much from our closest ape relatives? Like the other apes, humans are inquisitive, social, and excitable creatures, but we have employed our unique abilities to indulge these natural characteristics to a far greater level than those apes ever could. Another area in which we can clearly witness the intellectualization and exploitation of our instinctive drives is in our fascination with status. Systems of status and hierarchy have evolved within animal species to ensure the fitter, stronger, and more determined individuals will dominate the breeding or become leaders of the pack. For such a system to function successfully, three key elements need to be present. Firstly, qualities which signify the health, power, and vitality of the animals will need to be displayed among the group, such as large antlers, booming voices, and the physical contests of a rut. Although we too tend to be drawn to healthy looks and power, from the dawn of history, people have been fashioning status symbols of their own invention. From primitive jewellery and headdresses to Swiss watches, sports cars, and even artistic and intellectual prowess. The second element required is a common appreciation of the established status symbols of that particular species. Thirdly, these displays of status must provoke emotional reactions within the minds of the animals concerned. To maintain the evolved processes of competition, submission and deference, our minds are fed insatiable desires and insecurities, necessary to motivate our behaviours in accordance with the workings of the system. The strutting and roaring of a dominant male gorilla may induce a sense of awe or respect in other members of the group, but, in some lesser males, it may also excite a strong desire to aggressively compete for the superior role, to become that which they admire. Of course, the beneficial function of a rut would be lost unless the dominant role is vigorously defended. And likewise, in our own society, these aggressive responses can easily be demonstrated by belittling a man's achievements. It's not difficult to see how a creative imagination could play a significant role in the survival of animals, like when considering how we identify threats in a landscape. We humans tend to have a playful attitude to identifying the shapes of wild beasts and ghosts and monsters in amongst the rocks, tree roots and foliage of a forest, where such a talent may save lives in the animal world. Rabbits. As the staple diet of many different furred and feathered predatory species, rabbits must remain vigilant at all times while out of the burrow. We may perhaps appreciate how an instinctive sense of being watched or monitored could be vital to survival. Not only the survival of the rabbit, but also the predator, which must avoid being prematurely detected. If such a psychological tendency has evolved, then surely humans should be capable of sensing it to some degree. In which case, how would this innate influence be interpreted, developed and embellished by the highly intelligent, self-aware and inquisitive human mind? One aspect of our minds that language enables us to ponder is the actual experience of thinking itself, how we perceive this core of our being, our consciousness, as an ethereal entity, detached from the physical nature of our fleshy bodies. It is not surprising, then, that beliefs of non-physical or spiritual existence are universal to humankind. And if we were to combine these notions with a deep sense of being monitored, what manner of superstitious and religious inventions would ensue, both personal and cultural? Indeed, the concept of an unseen authoritative intelligence keeping tabs on our misdemeanours appears to be very difficult for our minds to shake off. But this is merely speculation on how an evolved psychological function might not only inspire a complex human invention such as a religion, but could also provide a deep sense of authenticity which reinforces those beliefs. One evolved mental function that certainly does stimulate our imagination is fear. Like other animals, we are born with a tendency to fear, and this tendency is applied and developed throughout our lives. During the infancy of human and chimpanzee, both may learn to fear snakes from observing the way in which their parents react to the creatures. But only the human can use that focus of fear to entertain others with language, telling tales of huge man-eating serpents. It is easy to understand how the fear of known dangers is essential for animal survival, and surely an instinctive tendency to fear unknown threats would be an added necessity, given that not all likely threats have been experienced by the individual. Perhaps, on hearing an unfamiliar, peculiar sound, the minds of animals will invent imaginary illusions of threat, much as our minds do while out walking alone at night. The compulsive draw of spookiness has created a rich heritage of storytelling, of dark caves, misty marshes, unseen, unknown threats. Some of the most down-to-earth of my friends will shamefully consider the presence of the supernatural when a tapping sound is heard on an old window late at night. This they do with full knowledge of things that are known to tap on windows, and that nothing ever, in a world of billions of people, has ever been shown to be caused by supernatural phenomena. To argue that this psychological conflict is solely the creation of cultural practices, one would need to ignore the ways in which we experience our fantasies of fear. An English country graveyard must be one of the safest places to take a midnight stroll. But while some of us may spend a lifetime struggling to accept this reasoning, we must also strive on a daily basis to remind ourselves of the very real dangers of road traffic. Again, it appears that human culture is only exploiting a deep, innate animal drive.
It is not the contrived ghosts and ghouls of books and movies which lie at the heart of our fears, but the menacing presence of an unknown, unseen entity that haunts our spookiest dreams, a nebulous, ghastly force, conscious and knowing, the very concept of evil itself.
If we possess an evolved instinct to motivate avoidance, a psychological function generating a profound sense of dread, and inspiring universal fantasies of the supernatural, then why not a similar instinct for attraction, or to generate a sense of awe? This may initially appear to be a fanciful idea, but when applied to the hierarchical and communal behaviour of animals, it begins to make a great deal of sense of thoughts, emotions and behaviours we witness in ourselves and in our own human societies. During infancy, young animals establish a foundation of awareness that will help them to survive and thrive. Learning from others of common dangers, available resources and group interactions. Perhaps it is also at this young age that these animals will learn to recognise their system of hierarchy, the rules of status which exist within their group. Of course, a status symbol is of no use if it is not valued, and like our tendencies to fear, tendencies of appreciation would be needed to ensure an adherence to this system, to recognise displays or qualities as being somehow special or awesome. At this early stage of development, we humans have yet to learn a language, and so our imaginative emotional minds must be operating much like that of an animal. Our innate disposition absorbing the experiences of our environment, making associations, connections, and observing the behaviour of people around us. A universal human tendency to conceive and propagate notions of specialness and reverence is evident throughout world history, and we can acknowledge that many of our own applications of this tendency stem from infancy. Certain objects or places from our childhood may appear to possess almost magical qualities, unique personal impressions that linger on within our adult minds. Consequently, we may regard our homeland with sentimental devotion, while the spurious religion of our parents can feel authentic or special. From the adornments of religion and royalty to the costumes of pop stars and partying, sparkly jewels and metals have been used extensively to represent general notions of specialness or glamour. Of course, such materials now constitute great wealth in themselves, and wealth is ever enduring as a show of status to those who can contemplate such values. But although many would suggest that the allure of status centres around the acquisition of money or power, a more elemental factor must precede these concepts. As what is the multimillionaire businessman looking to buy with so much accumulating wealth? Others will claim it's all about a basic human desire to be loved. But are people special to us because we love them, or do we love them because we find them to be special? The idea that these ambiguous notions of specialness play a highly significant role in human behaviour become more tangible when we consider the nature of envy. Unlike the more rational desires of covetousness, envy exists as a compulsive psychological response of resentment or anxiety aroused by our perception of certain contemporaries as being somehow more special than ourselves. Likewise with jealousy, we experience anxiety and aggression on sensing that a significant other considers us to be less special than someone else who we perceive to be a rival. We know from our own experiences, and from what we observe of others, that our envious perceptions are not rational desires, but can feel invasive and pernicious. And considering the universality of envy, and how its focus tends to fall solely upon members of our own sex, it certainly appears that these human traits correspond with the competitive and communal behaviour of animals. What would our world be like if humans really did possess an evolved psychological function to generate perceptions of specialness and awe? And what if, instead of recognising and understanding this influence, we actually believed in the fantasy notions aroused within our minds? The powerful allure to realise the promises inspired by these fantasies, to attain the special, magical qualities we see in others, would distract us from so much of genuine value by the futile pursuit of this innate deception. Many would struggle and compete for this throughout their lives, only to become confused and disillusioned as the mirage of glamour continued to elude them, while others would turn to despondent resignation. Envy, jealousy and resentment would thrive in such a world. Cultural systems would develop that employ and indulge this folly, using ambiguity and mystique as vacuums for us to fill with our romantic notions of glamour and prestige. Ordinary people and worthless objects thus elevated to positions of high esteem and reverence, while the worthy is unwittingly rejected. As children, we would grow up acquiring these empty and damaging values. Just as pornography stimulates sexual excitement, So this toxic culture, in the likes of fashions and trends, advertising and social media, would exacerbate these latent tendencies concerned with competition, dominance and possession. The process of human civilization would grind to a halt, unable to proceed until we gained sufficient understanding of these instinctive animal drives to free ourselves from their control, to exist as the far more reasoning and reasonable species that we are capable of being.